Tonight's class is taught by Avery Lewis. To go ahead and skip ahead to that class, check the screen for the time marker at which you can skip ahead to Avery's class. To hear the intro to my channel, a little bit more about my process of teaching, and get connected in different ways, continue listening, and then Avery's class will start right after. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and we look forward to connecting with you. Hi, my name is Kim, and welcome to my channel. You may have found yourself here when you were looking for yoga, yin yoga, anxiety relief, relaxation, something to do with Brene Brown that'll help your day feel better, or maybe you somehow stumbled here through a picture of a cute animal, or we know each other offline. However you made it here, welcome, and I'm glad that you're here. If you are joining me for a yoga class, go ahead and find yourself somewhere you can lie on the floor for about an hour to an hour and a half. And yes, I genuinely mean just somewhere you can lie on the floor. Yin yoga is a practice that can be done on a yoga mat, but can also just be done lying in the middle of your bedroom floor, your living room floor, or wherever you find yourself. We'll be moving through about a dozen or so different poses that might feel like they are simple at first, but the purpose of yin yoga is to find a way to use our breath and our self willpower to sit in the same position for 3 to 5 or maybe even 7 minutes. And while that sounds simple at first and maybe not like what anything you ever thought yoga could be is, over time we work to ride the edge and the waves of sensation. We never want to push ourselves to a sense of pain, and so if you ever find yourself in pain, please move in a way that feels better for you. But we want to ride the waves of sensation so that we can use the ability to take a deeper inhale, to take a longer exhale, to sit with things that feel new or uncomfortable. Because off the mat or off the floor or outside of this moment that you find yourself in, there can be a lot of things that are hard to deal with, a lot of things that are hard to sit with, and a lot of things that you are trying to push away or avoid or take a break from. And it's not a problem to take a break. But when we find ourselves unable to take a pause and just be with ourselves for 5 minutes, we maybe need to take more breaks for ourselves. So think of this time, whether you participate in the movement or not, as a time for you to take a break, to take a pause, and just to give back to yourself. You probably spend hours and hours each day giving your time to someone else in the interest of hopefully something you enjoy. But take this time for you to sit, to lie, to be, and to breathe. Thank you, and I'll see you on the mat.
Well, before I start blabbing, any special requests for movement? None? Eric, this class is really similar to what I used to teach at the other space in terms of like cadence and flow. The door shut. You did. Okay. Well, so last week we talked about, I might have here last week, Keith was here last week. We talked about this new concept, or new for me, concept called raícism, which is rootedness in Spanish. And I was reading this book about raícism as an antidote for racism. So it's like a being rooted and being really tied to your own heritage as a way to, and like understanding the relationship that your ancestors had with other cultures as a way to kind of combat the supremacy racism in the world today. So anyway, I've been like mulling over this idea of racism, and I was thinking about, so one of the things as I've been sort of unpacking my own ancestry, I think about this a lot in terms of how my relationship to other movement practices that are not from my ancestral cultural traditions, like what does that really mean? Like as a white European American person practicing yoga is from South Asia. I practice qigong, like I have all these other practices, and it's sort of like plucking from all these other cultures, and it feels really icky sometimes. It doesn't feel good. And so one way that I'm trying to come back into my sort of integrity with the practice is to root into what, through racism and rootedness, to root into my own ancestral traditions. That's why I'm so interested in what Holly's doing. And what I've been finding as I like to learn more about my own ancestral practices is that like across the board, all cultures at some point have had a spiritual practice that involves movement. If you go back far enough, it's so innate to humanness. And that feels really good. It's like, okay, there's a reason why we're called to these practices. And there's grief in the disconnect of living in a white body and not having, like, what did we give up for our whiteness? We gave up a lot of our culture. We gave up a lot of these spiritual practices. So I'm sort of like personally like winding my way around through the backyard and back into yoga from this perspective and into movement in general. So, so we largely practice yoga in this space, but I'm also weaving in things that I'm learning from other somatic practices and things like that. And so in addition to just like movement practice, one thing that all of these movement and spiritual traditions seem to get at in one way or another is this idea of what we like our sort of modern world is referring to as our felt sense. In yoga, we might call that prana or life force. In qigong, it would be qi. So there's all these different names for this really similar concept. And so I think when we come into this space and we're practicing being in our bodies and we're really trying to inhabit this physical body that we're in, part of that is coming into relationship with our felt sense. And a felt sense really just means our inner awareness, like of what's happening inside our body. And we get better at it the more we practice it. So that's why we spend time during meditation and sending our minds to different areas of the body. And what I notice as I do that in my practice is that there's some places inside my body that feel totally vacant, like really hard to feel. And most of the time it's like from here to here, it's like very difficult for me to actually have awareness of. And then there's other parts, my heart feels really easy to tap into. My hands and feet feel really easy to tap into. So it's just an interesting thing to think about where can you inhabit, and then to have some curiosity around that and softness to it. And so that's one way I'm kind of blending my personal historical practices, ancestral practices of sort of inner feeling into yoga. And this has been kind of a clunky path for me, and so it's just interesting. I don't know. Well, okay. Because I'm noticing that we're all in white bodies in this room, and so perhaps we've had thoughts like this at some point. And I feel clunky in my exploration of this. It's helpful for me to bring it into this room and practice. It feels safe for me to bring it into this room and practice moving through it with other people. So if that resonates for you, that's what I'm going to try to focus on through our movements tonight. Tapping into this idea of felt sense and whatever rootedness racism means for you, and whether you can really like conceptualize who your ancestors are. Some of us really don't know. It wasn't until really recently that I even knew where my people were from. But if you do know, or if you don't know, it's more about like connecting to something that feels deeper and older than whiteness. The concept of whiteness is relatively recent in human history, right? So if we can like peel back those layers and get back to like what is the innate humanness when it comes to movement and spirituality and breath and being in bodies that were. So that's what's been on my mind. That's what I'm going to try to weave into this for us tonight. And then in terms of movements, we'll start on our backs like we normally do, but I think I'm going to have us actually turn around so that you have your heads up towards the front of the room and your feet towards the back of the room. You can keep blocks up towards the front of the mat. You already have them there. And then I think we might want a blanket to lay on as you're coming down onto your back. So maybe just like Hold it enough to be some knee padding for later. It can pad your pelvis for right now. Yeah. Okay, so just let yourself arrive. And you can think about just letting all the words that were just spoken, the concepts that we just, kind of danced across the surface of, see if you can just let those softly land on your physical body right now. So as we start the practice, I'm going to try to have us bring attention really inward into the body, and we'll start trying to send our mind, our awareness into different parts of the body, and just notice for yourself where you can feel yourself inside your body, where you can feel aliveness, and where it might feel sort of like nothingness or vacancy. And try not to have any judgment about that. Just notice what's there, what's available to be felt, and what isn't. So just starting by letting your breath come easy. So first tapping into that. And as you let inhales move in through your nose, allow your body to move in whatever ways it wants to make space for that inhale. And same thing on the exhale. As the air leaves your body, let your body move in whatever ways it needs to support the exhale. And starting with our extremities first, you can take your mind's attention down to your feet and try to really come alive inside your feet. Inhabit your feet. Know that they are your feet. They're attached to your body. Feel that your toes attach to the foot and the foot attaches to the ankle. And then let your awareness travel up your legs. So up the left and right leg equally. Feel yourself alive in your legs. You might notice as you're bringing your attention into your legs that you want to soften through your hip creases. You sort of unintentionally be gripping in that space. And then let your awareness fill your pelvis, your glutes, and your low belly. And let your awareness move into your mid body, your torso, your rib cage. If you have any sense of your internal anatomy, you might visualize your stomach, your intestines, your spleen, kidneys, liver. If you're not sure where those things are, just know that they're in there. And that they're working really hard to process all of your nutrition and detoxify your blood. And then let your awareness move up into your chest cavity and feel into your lungs and your heart situated between your lungs. You might sense your diaphragm moving up and down as you breathe, which is this like sheath of tissue that separates the abdominal viscera from your lungs and your heart. And then come into your shoulders and your shoulder blades. Feel your shoulder blades against the ground. Feel yourself alive in your shoulders. And let that sensation move down the arms, through your elbows, forearms, wrists, and into the hands. Let yourself come into each hand, each finger, each fingernail. Let yourself exist in your throat, in your voice. And then as you bring your attention into your head, think of this less as like a cognitive inhabiting and more of a physical, felt inhabiting. So you might imagine just sort of a softness falling across your face, your eyes relaxing, mouth relaxing, tongue softening. If there's any conscious gripping through your eyebrows or your forehead, you can let that relax. And then try to feel yourself alive through your whole body. And again, give yourself the grace to have some vacant spots. Most of us do. Most of us are pretty disconnected or disassociated from various parts of our body. And so just becoming aware of which parts those might be can be helpful in the process of eventually inhabiting them. So we're going to keep bringing our attention back to various parts of the body as we move through a movement practice. And then eventually we'll come back to a seat and we'll explore this in stillness again. So as it's feeling good for you, you can reach your arms up overhead and then take the bottoms of your feet to the floor. And then if it feels good, you can heel toe the feet out a little bit wider and just let your knees fall side to side. This can be totally at your own pace. It might feel good to go really slow if that helps you stay inside your body. And then you can let the hips kind of really be a part of this movement so they get kind of pulled along for the ride. As your knees fall to one side, the hip can kind of lift up and there's a big stretch between the knees and the hands. Yeah. And then when you feel pretty even on both sides, you can just stretch your feet straight up into the air. And I'm going to have you just kind of intuitively move your feet and ankles around. You can draw toes towards your face if that feels good. Stretch the heels skyward. You might try to just like articulate through the feet as best you can, maybe pressing the inner foot up towards the ceiling and then the outer foot. Notice what movement is available to you there. And then go ahead and bend your knees. And we're going to keep the feet lifted so that we have kind of like a 90-degree angle. And the knees will be kind of situated right over your hips and shins will be parallel to the ground. Yeah. And then grab one of your blocks. So just reach your hand up and grab for one of your blocks. They're up by the top of your mat. Yep. And bring that block right between your thighs. And then give the block a little squeeze with your thighs to hold it in place. Yeah. And then I'm going to have you place your palms on your thighs and press your hands into your legs and your legs back into your hands. And just feel how your core has to ignite a little bit to do that. And then give the block a little squeeze and curl your tailbone up towards the ceiling. And so what I'm hoping you'll notice here is that as you're engaging your inner thighs, your low belly has to engage too, that there's a connection between the two of those. Good, so go ahead and soften that. You can keep the block between your legs, but just soften your grip, soften through your glutes. We're just gonna do that a few times. So take an inhale first. Then as you exhale, squeeze the block, press your hands into your legs into your hands, let the tailbone curl up. And then inhale and relax that. Do that a few times on your own, exhaling to squeeze and find that effort, and inhaling to soften. We're going to keep returning to this sensation in various poses tonight, so I want us to feel it in this reclined place where we can really focus on it as an individual sensation or movement. Good. Okay, and then you can go ahead and remove the block and set it back up towards the top of your mat. And then just draw your knees in towards your chest, wrap your arms around your legs, and you can rock side to side if that feels good. Okay, so I'm gonna have us come onto our bellies next. You can just roll over onto one side and then come onto your stomach. And we're gonna come into a low Sphinx pose. So I'm gonna have you bring your forearms to the mat in front of you, and your elbow can be a little bit ahead of the shoulder. So you have like a 45-degree angle there. And this is gonna be a pretty active Sphinx pose. So take the tops of your feet to the floor and press the tops of your feet down. So you might feel your kneecaps lift, and then reach your tailbone back and spread your fingers really wide against the mat. And I'm gonna have you draw your hands toward you so that your chest can kind of pull through. And then you're gonna get really tall through the top of your head. Yeah. And then just real slowly, look side to side over one shoulder at a time. It's possible that as you do this, you'll feel some sensation down the side of your spine and towards your sacrum. And once you've looked both way a couple of times, then you can bring your face back around through center and just let your chin drop down towards your chest. So then your choice here, it might feel good just to stay still for a few breaths, or you could gently trace your chin back and forth across the collarbones. We're going to gently lift the head back upright, relax your legs, and then take your hands underneath your shoulders, and we're going to press back to a child's pose. So you've got a blanket here for some knee padding. So just taking a few breaths here, allowing your back body to expand a little bit as you breathe, finding some space through your low back. And start to let your hands grip the mat and draw yourself up to a tabletop. And then we're going to move through some cat-cow. So on your inhale, you can reach your head up towards the ceiling, let your tailbone lift, belly drops. And then as you exhale, round into cat pose, press into your hands, round your spine. So these really simple movements are a good place to practice that felt sense. I think it's easier if you close your eyes actually, and just see if you can actually visualize what your spine is doing. So you can have some sense of what's happening internally. And even if you're not sure exactly where all of your organs are in relation to each other, they're all in this central area, right? They're all in the torso. So as you're opening up into cow pose, there's some extra space for your organs to splay forward. And then as you round into cat pose, your abdominal muscles kind of embrace the organs and draw them back in. Okay, so if you want to incorporate any other movements here, now's a good time to do that. You might kind of make some big barrel rolls with your rib cage, or you might send one hip back towards your heel at a time. And then I'm going to have us start to slowly come back to a neutral spine and find your block again. And we're going to take the block again between your thighs. You might have to walk the knees in a little bit closer to each other. And then we're going to tuck the toes under, and we're going to try to do a little movement between tabletop and down dog and see if we can keep that engagement of the inner thighs and the low belly. So just give the block a little squeeze with your legs and feel your low belly turn on. And then take an inhale. And as you exhale, reach back to downward facing dog and take the block with you between your legs. Good. And then as you inhale, slowly come back to tabletop. Keep squeezing the block as you lower down. Good. And then you can exhale all the way. We'll do that one more time. Inhale here. And then exhale, squeeze the block as you reach back, downward facing dog. Good. Inhaling as you lower, nice and slow. And then exhale. We're going to do that once more. Inhale. And then exhale, squeeze the block, downward facing dog. We're going to stay here for a couple of breaths. Press into the palms of your hands. Get really long through your side body. Good. Okay, so this is just an experiment. I'm going to see if we can move back and forth from here into plank pose, carrying the block with us. So as you inhale, lift your heels and shift forward into plank. Yeah, squeeze the block with your legs. Good. And then exhale, back downward facing dog. Have you do that a couple times at your own pace. It's going to feel a little different for everybody. When you come to plank and you have the block between your legs, see if you can imagine rotating the block up towards the ceiling. So there's a little inward rotation of your thighs. Good. And then the next time that you come forward into plank, you can pause there and we'll lower down onto our bellies. Good. So as you come to your belly, you can remove the block, set it aside. Take the tops of your feet to the floor. And then we're going to inhale for Cobra Pose, lifting through your face, your throat, and your heart. And then exhale and release back down. Good. Tuck your toes under and press, if you can, back up to plank. Imagine you have that block between your thighs. And then downward facing dog. Good. Okay, so from this down dog, I'm going to have us walk our hands toward our feet. So you're coming to a forward fold at the back of your mat. And we're just going to let this be like a ragdoll forward fold. So you can let your knees bend pretty generously. If it feels okay for your head and neck, you can let the head hang. And then keeping a little bend in the knees, we're going to come to a halfway lift, bringing your hands to your shins as you inhale. Reach the top of your head forward, draw your shoulder blades together, and then exhale and fold. And then pushing into your feet, slowly uncurl up to standing. See if you can unravel just one vertebra at a time. Okay, so we're going to take a walk to the front of our mat, and we're going to do it really slowly so that as you walk heel to toe, you're really articulating through your whole foot, and you're feeling the sensation of your foot against the blanket, the mat, the floor. Good. Okay. I think we all have blocks handy except for me. So let's make sure we've got blocks up towards the top of the mat. I'm going to have us put them on their highest setting right in front of our feet. And then coming to Tadasana, so our feet will be about hips width distance apart. We're going to take a little bend in the knees so we have some buoyancy and springiness to our system. And then as we inhale, we'll sweep the arms out and up. And then exhale as you fold forward. Keep a little bend in your knees as you fold. Take your hands to your blocks this time. Inhale, come up for a halfway lift. Shoulder blades come onto your back, and exhale, fold. Good. Let's take the blocks back to frame our feet, and then we're going to step the right foot back and bring the right knee down onto the ground. So hopefully you've got a blanket there. Yeah. Okay. So before we bring any strength into this pose, if it feels good, you can bend into that front knee pretty generously and let your hips open, feeling a stretch through your right front hip. And then it might feel good on an exhale to shift your hips back in space and lengthen your front leg. So I'll let you kind of wiggle into this in whatever way feels good for you. You might move back and forth a couple of times. We're all going to carry tension in different ways. So just move in any way that feels sort of liberating to your muscles. Right, and then let's settle back into that original position. The front foot's going to be all the way against the ground. And then I'm going to have you imagine that you have that block between your thighs, which obviously wouldn't be possible because our legs are split. But just imagine that it's there and engage your thighs as if you were squeezing that block. So feel as if there's an imaginary block there to hold on to. And then from that strength, you might feel your low belly engaging. And from there, the hands can get pretty light on the blocks, and then maybe they lift up towards the ceiling. So you might come back to that concept of rootedness. And if you were to feel that rootedness somatically right now, you could think about roots growing down through the bottom of your front foot. You might even think of the entire legs as roots. And we'll take an inhale here. And as we exhale, we're going to twist to the left. Let your arms come out wide to a T. Maybe you look back behind you. And keep squeezing that imaginary block for some stability. And then we'll let the inhale bring you back around, arms come overhead. And then exhale, let your hands find your blocks. You can soften through the legs for just a minute as you tuck the back toes under and then lift the back knee. And then we'll find just a couple of those cat-cow shapes here. So as we inhale, we'll lift up through the head, widen through the heart. And then exhale, push into the front foot, slide your hips back, round your spine. Let's do that one more time, inhaling as you shift forward. Exhaling as you shift back. And then inhaling back forward. Okay, again, imagining you've got that block between your legs. Squeeze the imaginary block. Feel your inner thighs engage. Fingers can get light on your blocks. Feel your belly supporting you. And then we'll inhale, let the arms lift. So feel the rootedness of yourself through your feet and through your legs. Option to stay here. Option to come into a twist just like we did before, to the left with arms wide. Or it might feel good this time to come into a prayer twist, taking arms together at your heart, and then hooking your right elbow over the left thigh. If you're taking that, yeah, exactly. Find your steadiness. Feel that imaginary block. Keep your back leg alive. Yeah, long through your whole spine. Good. Okay, we're gonna open up to warrior two next. So as steadily as you can, we're gonna gently unwind. Let your back heel spin down. Whole back foot finds the floor. And then our arms open wide. It's really hard to do that. It sucks. Okay. I think it might feel good to open up through the sides here. Let's go ahead and find opposite elbows overhead. And then take a big inhale as you stretch your elbows back towards the back of the room. It might feel good to push into that front foot and get long from all the way from the front toes up to the front elbow. And then we're going to come forward for triangle pose next. So we're going to let the hips kind of tick-tock back. Arms will come out nice and wide. You might let that front hand find your shin or your thigh or a block. And the other arm will reach up towards the ceiling. Feel yourself alive in your hands, in your feet. Notice where your spine is, where your lungs and your heart are. Okay, and then inhale and start to reach that floating hand up towards the ceiling. Let that bring you back to warrior two. And then we're going to push into the front foot, lengthen that leg, take both feet to parallel each other. And then we'll take hands to clasp at the base of the spine. And as you inhale, you can stretch your fist down, lift your heart up. And then exhaling, hinge right at your hips and fold forward. It might feel good to let the arms come overhead and let your head hang. If that doesn't feel good on your shoulders, just release your hands and bring them down to the floor. Part of coming into the body and really learning how to inhabit your own body is being able to make really important choices for yourself about how you move and to honor what's happening inside your own body. It's hard to make those choices when we're not aware of what's going on. So if it would feel good here, you can release your hands down to the floor, and it might feel nice to kind of like bend one knee at a time and shift weight side to side. And if you're doing that, I'm going to encourage you to try to stay connected through the bottoms of your feet. And then when you're ready, we're going to start to walk the hands back around towards the front of the mat. Let our feet turn with us so we come back into that lunge. And then we're just going to set the blocks aside so that we can step back to a plank pose. And then it's going to be your choice. If you want to move through that series of postures of vinyasa, you can do that. You can press back to down dog, take child's pose or tabletop. Wherever you land, we're going to take like 4 or 5 breaths there. So if you're in child's pose, you can rest for a few breaths. If you're hanging out in down dog, that could feel good too. And just notice what you can feel internally. So there's different ways that we feel things, right? We feel through our senses, through touch, through taste, through smell, through sight. We get information that way. So we have exteroception, come in that way. And an interoception is what we feel from the inside out. So when we take big breath, how do we feel our lungs expanding in their relationship to our heart? When you take big breath, how do you feel your ribs adjusting to make space for that breath? So those are things that we're feeling from the inside. Some traditions might call that intuition. Some traditions might call that felt sense. Okay, let's try that sequence on the other side. As you're ready, you can grip the mat with your fingers, draw yourself up to a tabletop, and find downward facing dog. And then taking a bend in the knees, we're going to look forward between the hands and start to walk your feet forward, standing forward fold. Find your blocks under your hands. We'll use them to help us with a halfway lift, nice long spine. And then exhale to fold. And then push into your feet and inhale as you sweep your arms out and up. And then exhale right back into that fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale and fold. We'll bring the blocks back to frame our feet. And then this time, step the left foot back. And we're going to take the left knee all the way down to the ground. So we've got some padding under the knee if that feels good. And then we'll just move in any way that feels nice for you here. So it might feel good just to let the whole pelvis hang forward, getting a nice stretch through the front of your left hip. Or it might feel good to shift your hips back and stretch through your hamstring on the right side. Feel your way into the posture. Whatever choices you're making about your body right now are the right choices. And then let's settle back into that original posture. So we're going to let the front knee come over the front ankle. And we're going to imagine we've got that block between the thighs again, and we're going to squeeze the block so that we've got some support through the legs and through the low belly. And eventually that's going to let some spaciousness happen through the upper body so we can lift our arms. You can stay here if you want to, or on an exhale, you can take a turn to the right, open your arms out wide to a T, maybe look back over your right fingers. And then let's inhale, come back through center. And we'll let the fingers come back down to find the blocks. Tuck the back toes under, lift the back knee. And we're going to move through some of those cat-cow shapes here. So as we inhale, we'll lift through the head, let your shoulder blades draw together. And then as you exhale, push into the front foot, hips slide back. And just do that a couple times, creating whatever space you need. So don't lose sight of your back leg. Let your back leg be a part of this too. And then when you are ready to settle back in, you can let the front knee bend and then come into this pose intentionally. So let your inner thighs engage as if there's the block there. Feel the belly turn on. And then as you inhale, lift your arms. So we're all wobbling a little bit, which is this like really cool thing our bodies do to understand where we're at in space and to help us balance proprioception. So you can stay here if you want, or you might choose to come back to that twist at a T. So you can let the arms open up to the right. Or if it felt good on the other side, you can come into that prayer twist and hook your left elbow over your right thigh. Good, and then we're headed towards Warrior Two next, and it's a big transition. So move slowly, inhaling as you unwind. So then we're gonna let the back heel find the floor. We're gonna open the arms out wide to a T. Nice, okay. Then let's go ahead and grab opposite elbows over our head. And on an inhale, let your elbows tilt towards the back of the room. Big side stretch through your right side. Maybe you push into the front foot and lengthen there so you're long from the front toes to the front elbow. And then we'll let that tick-tock us forward into triangle pose. You can let your whole torso lean forward, release your arms. Front arm comes down maybe to your shin or a block, and the other arm reaches up towards the ceiling. And then just notice where your attention is right now before I tell it to go anywhere. What do you feel? Where are you? Are you even in this room? Are you even in your body? Where's your attention? Yeah. So coming into your hands fully, we'll start to lift that top hand up towards the ceiling. Let that bring you up and out of the posture. Come back to Warrior Two. And then we're going to push into the front foot, lengthen that foot, and bring both feet to parallel each other. And then it's your choice on the forward fold. If you want to take your hands to clasp again at the base of your spine, that might feel good. You can take your hands just to frame your hips. Either way, as you inhale, reach up through your spine, open your heart up towards the ceiling. And then as you exhale, hinge at your hips and fold. You can take fingers down to the floor or to blocks. And then try to make a decision here for yourself based on your own internal knowing of what's happening in your body, what your body is desiring. You might do a little movement here. You might shift weight side to side. You might let the head hang, shaking the head yes and no. You might come into like a really squat down dog and walk your arms forward and just feel the full length of you from your hip creases to your fingers. Yeah, that's great. Might feel good to kind of rock your weight back and forth from the toe side of the foot back to the heel. And feeling for where your feet are rooted into the ground. And then eventually, when you feel ready, you can start walking hands back around towards the front of your mat. Coming back to that lunge just long enough so that we can move our blocks out of the way and step back to step back to plank pose. And then move through any movement of your choice. You can move through a vinyasa if you want, or press back to a child's pose or down dog. And we're going to take a little bit of time here. So wherever you land, you find like 4 or 5 breaths. And then just notice what you notice. Notice if you're in your body or not, and try not to make a judgment about that. The real practice is actually just noticing that. It's not even, there's no like final step to embodiment. It's the constant process of trying to be inside your body. Okay, so we're going to come to a seated posture next. When you are ready for that, you can pull yourself up to a tabletop. And I'm going to have you just arrange your props however you like to sit. So if you want to sit cross-legged, I would recommend bringing a folded up blanket underneath your seat. Another option is to stack your blocks and you can kneel on them. So coming into something that will feel comfortable for maybe like 5 minutes or so. So as you are getting comfortable in this seated shape, I'll have you start to root down into whatever your sit bones are anchoring into. So if you're sitting on a blanket, feel the density of the blanket, feel its give, feel its texture. If you're sitting on blocks, feel the density of the block and how it supports you. And then feel that as your pelvis is rooted, that your spine has space to grow tall from it. And you can lift up tall through the top of your head. You might feel some heaviness through the forearms and the elbows. Just coaxing the shoulders to melt down away from your earlobes. And try to see for yourself if you feel like you're more in the front of your body or the back of your body right now. Like, where is it easier to be? Where is it easier for your attention to rest? Most of us are kind of habitually in the front of our bodies. We're sort of like always waiting for the next thing, and we're kind of in that forward movement all the time. So if that's where you find yourself, it could be interesting to just invite yourself to come back, rest back. You might even imagine like leaning back into your shoulder blades as if your shoulder blades were there to like hold you, as if they were just like a friend's hands right at your back that you could lean into. And I don't know about you, but when I soften back, when I like inhabit the back of my body in that way, it's almost an immediate softening through my whole system. It's like it allows for an almost instant soft inhale, like, oh, there I am. In a lot of somatic work, the back of our body is tied to our histories and our ancestry. So it's an interesting place to explore inhabiting if we're doing the work of raícism or rootedness. If we're peeling back the layers into what it really means to have movement and spiritual practice as a human. I'm going to spend a couple more minutes here, and I'll invite you just to be in your body as much as it's comfortable. Feel the flow of your breath moving in and out. And if you have found that inhabiting your body today or any day is difficult, it's like there has to be an introduction. You have to introduce yourself to your felt sense, and there might not be an immediate, strong, amazing relationship, just like that's not often the case between people. You have to give some time to that and cultivate that relationship with your felt sense, with this idea of sort of being able to feel yourself from the inside out. kind of like coming into relationship with plants or herbs, that rather than just taking from a plant, we try to build relationship with the plant first, right? If you're a gardener, you might know this. You water the plant, you amend the soil, you care for the plant before you ever take anything from it. And it's kind of like that with your felt sense. You're really just saying, like, I'm here, I'm listening, and you're tending to it in a way that allows a relationship to be built. And so for the next minute or so, just start to take slow inhales through your nose and feel for how your breath moves down through your throat and into your lungs. Notice how your ribs move to let that happen. And then as you exhale, everything gathers back in and the air moves back up through the throat and out the nose. So before we open our eyes, I'm going to ask that you try to open them really slowly and let whatever you see come to you. So try to stay in the back body, stay in, like, inhabit the back body, that soft place, that relaxed place, and let the vision come to you. Okay. So we're going to take all of that we've just done, our movement and being inside our bodies, and try to let that softly integrate through some restorative postures. Most of these will be familiar to you all. The first one we're going to come into is a heart opener. I'm going to have us take one block on its lowest setting. This can be towards the back of your mat. And then the second block on the medium setting. You might choose to go on the highest setting, see what feels good for you. And it might feel good to actually put a blanket over that first block. We're going to have our shoulder blades on this. So it might be nice to have a little extra cushion, especially if you have cork blocks. So as we come into this, we're going to let the shoulder blades rest on the block. And you might have to do a little wiggling. They're actually higher than you think they might be. They're not like the middle of your back. Your shoulder blades are just under your shoulders there. And then we're going to let the head rest back on that second block. Okay, with this one, your blocks are kind of. Is that okay? So I'm just going to dim the lights a little bit so that if you want to keep your eyes open or softly gaze, it won't be too bright. If you've gotten into this pose and it doesn't feel very good, or there's like pinching or sort of like crunchy feeling in your spine, you can just come down onto your back. The idea is to be in a position that feels pretty effortless, but opening. And I'll invite you just to try to soften your edges, soften around your skin and the places where you're coming into contact with the air around you, so that you can let all of the attention that you've given to this practice tonight time to just settle in. Okay. I'm going to have us gently roll to one side so that you can remove the blocks from under you and then come back down onto your back. And you'll just want to keep one block handy. As you're letting your spine find the floor, keep the bottoms of your feet against the floor, so that just kind of helps the spine come into its really neutral, sort of natural curvature. And take 2 big belly breaths. See if you can really fill your whole stomach cavity. You can breathe all the way down towards your pelvis. Good. And then we're going to come into a supported bridge pose next. So as you feel ready for that, you can push your feet into the ground and lift your hips. And then we're just going to slide one of those blocks underneath your sacrum. And then just to make sure you're actually on your sacrum. So your sacrum is the back of your pelvis. So it's not your low back. It's where this that kind of bony plate at the base of your spine. Yeah. So I'm just going to give us some options while we're here. It might feel good to really just rest in this shape. It might feel good to bring one knee in toward your chest as you reach the other leg long in front of you. And you might choose to use your arms to support you there. So you might kind of let the hands wrap around that knee. And then whenever you're ready, you can take the other side. So I'll let you make that choice. Something that can feel interesting if you're kind of hanging out there and you're having the knee in towards your chest, you might try to pull the knee a little bit closer towards the armpit, so like to the side of your torso. And then you could play around with how active that extended foot is. You might like flex the foot or point the toe and just see if that changes sensation. And then the last thing you might try while you're here is lifting the legs straight up into the air and allowing some of the fluid that has accumulated in the root system throughout the day in your feet and your legs to travel back down towards your brain and your heart. I'm going to give us like a minute or so here, but if you want to come down, just gently lower your feet. You're also welcome to remove the block. So if your feet are still lifted, you can bend your knees and then let one foot at a time find the floor. And once your feet have connected to the ground, you can press the feet down, lift your hips, remove the block, and gently let your pelvis come back down to the ground. And then take 2 more big belly breaths there before you do any big movements. Okay, and then let's cross the right ankle over the left thigh. Coming to a figure 4. And then if it feels good, you can draw that whole structure in towards your chest. So you might wrap your arms around the left thigh and bring that leg in. Just notice where your attention is here. And can you have a felt sense of what's happening through your right hip, right low back? And then if it feels good, you might choose to deepen this a little bit and let this whole figure 4 structure tilt towards the left so that the bottom of your right foot touches the ground. And then you can use your left hand to hold on to your right ankle. And then maybe the right knee reaches up towards the ceiling or perhaps even towards the front of the room. Big belly breath into your right side. And then before you come through center, unhook your legs. And then draw the knees back through the middle. And we'll do that on the other side as you're ready. You can take the left ankle over the right thigh and gently draw the right leg in. And give yourself a couple breaths here just to acclimate to this shape. Let your attention come down into your left hip. And your attention being there will help to decide how far you want to take this. If you do want to move farther, you can start to let that whole figure four structure tilt towards the right this time, so that the bottom of the left foot comes to the floor. And then you can hold on to your left ankle with your right hand. And take some big belly breath into your left side. And before you come through center, uncross your legs. And then it might feel good to bring both knees in towards your chest, or you could take some windshield wipers, letting the knees sprawl side to side. Maybe a happy baby, drawing knees towards the armpits. And we are approaching our final posture for the class, our Shavasana or corpse pose, ultimate integration time. So I'm going to let you set up for that in whatever way would feel good for you. I know some of you have bolsters and pillows with you tonight. If you want to slide a bolster under the knees or under your back, that might feel good. If you have a blanket you want to toss over your body or under your head as a pillow, whatever you need to kind of get cozy. So you don't have to do anything specific during this last pose. You can let the mind wander a bit if that's what it's wanting to do naturally. If it feels good to stay focused on your breath, you can do that. If you feel like you're floating off into sleepiness or dreaminess, just go with it. This is the time for sort of all the threads of the practice to kind of weave together and be integrated in an unconscious way. And start to allow for a deeper inhale and more complete exhales. And as you're finding that deeper breath, you can start to gather up all the threads of your attention and bring them back into you. And then it may feel nice to make some really small movements, maybe just brushing your fingertips with the pad of your thumb or rocking your head side to side. And when you're ready for it, those little movements can grow. You might point and flex the feet or stretch your arms overhead. And in whatever way makes sense to you, we're going to start to come back to a seated position. So you can roll to one side if that feels good, or rock up to a seat. And giving yourself a moment just to adjust to this orientation. Letting your ribs float over your pelvis and the shoulders over your ribs, your head over your shoulders. Noticing if your attention is in the front of your body or the back of your body. If it's up towards your head or down towards your pelvis. And then I'll invite you to bring your hands anywhere that feels meaningful for you. You might bring them into a prayer shape or place a hand at the heart, a hand at the belly, both hands at your heart. One of the ways I've been practicing rootedness or Raicism is to honor and acknowledge the lineages that I have learned from. And tonight we pulled largely on Hatha Yoga, Kundalini, Tantra, Tantric breathwork, and generative somatics. So you might take just a moment now and honor any lineages or practices that inform the way you move in the world. And just bring that to the forefront of your mind, if it's there. And in the spirit of that naming, I'll also acknowledge the land that we are on and extend my gratitude to the Native communities that have stewarded this land for generations and who continue to care for it today. And with that, I'll conclude our practice. Let's take a couple of breaths together. You can start by exhaling all the way. And let an inhale breath come in. And let it all the way out. And do that once more, big inhale. And exhale all the way. thank you so much for coming tonight, practicing with me. Please stay for tea if you have time and want to hang out for a little bit. Thank you, Josh, for being that.